Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantirme Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas satbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Shanti 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 Harihi Om.
We will sing Meditate, O My Mind on page 18.
Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Te Namam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Our subject today is meditation. Most of us who come to the Vedanta Society have some meditation practice of our own. So this is not a subject that is not familiar to most of us here. Some of us have received meditation practice from a teacher. Some of us are doing it in our from different ways. But it's helpful to now and then go to the basics. So what we will see today, meditation is a pretty big subject. So what we will focus today on three primary questions. First, what is meditation? Second, how to meditate? And third, what are the benefits of meditation? Just the primary preliminary questions related to that. It's a great, meditation itself is a very general term. It covers a very vast territory, encompassing within it the insights and practices of varied traditions from all over the world. The insights that have been developed and practiced over many centuries. So let's look at these three questions, primary questions. So what is meditation? The word meditation has evolved as language. Language evolves. The words acquire new meanings, or their original meaning changes over time. Originally, the word meditation was used to refer to a prolonged reflection on any one subject. The meditations of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius is a well-known example of this reflection. So there is this very well-known book, Meditations, of Marcus Aurelius. So their meditation is meant a very prolonged reflection on a given subject. In Christian religious literature, meditation is generally means a discursive thinking on a scriptural passage. And in the three main spiritual disciplines in Catholic monastic tradition are said to be I don't know Latin, but I'm trying. Oratio, meditatio, and contemplatio, meaning prayer, meditation, and contemplation. Now, in the lectures and writings of Swami Vivekananda in the late 19th century, he primarily used the word meditation in the sense of dhyana, which is what contemplation is. So the distinction between contemplation and meditation, as it existed about 200 years ago, that no longer holds true. So increasingly, in the times in which you and I live, the two terms, meditation and contemplation, are almost used very synonymously. Patanjali, the great synthesizer of yoga, the yogic tradition itself is very old. Patanjali was among the great teachers who synthesized, who brought together and summarized the yogic tradition as it existed during his time. Now, he refers to meditation or dhyana, that's the Sanskrit word, dhyana. It's the same Sanskrit word through the Buddhist teachers in the 5th century. Then when it went via Tibet and went to China, the same word the dhyana became Chan. And by the time we reached Japan, it became Zen. So all these terms, Zen, Chan, really come from the Sanskrit dhyan. Patanjali defines dhyana or meditation as the steady flow of a single thought. In Sanskrit, he says, Tatra pratyaya ekatanata dhyanam. Pratyaya means a thought or knowledge. So the knowledge that is produced from a thought. So ekatanata means it's a single flow, a steady flow. Now, understood in that sense, that it is a steady flow of a single thought, it's clear that meditation is primarily a state of consciousness. It is something that is or something that happens. But increasingly, we use the word meditation as a kind of practice, something that can be done or something that should be done. So the techniques that help us achieve that state of consciousness are secondarily therefore called meditation. So meditation in a primary sense is something that happens. In a secondary sense, meditation is something that can be done. In other words, the techniques that can help me achieve or attain that state of consciousness. Now, when we think of meditation as something that can be done, that involves thinking, because thinking is mental activity. So when we sometimes say, no, I would like to do meditation, I would like to practice meditation, what we are really saying is, I want to know how to think about God, or think about the spiritual ideal. And as I've said, thinking is an activity, but meditation is a state. So thinking can lead to meditation. Thinking done in a right way, in a systematic way, can lead us to meditation. But the process of thinking and the process of meditating need to be distinguished. Sometimes the example in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, oftentimes, the analogy of a mind, they often use the analogy of a body of water, lake, for instance. And we know that on the surface of water, oftentimes there are ripples, there are waves. And Patanjali, when he uses the word yoga, he uses primarily in the sense of concentration. And the analogy we find in yoga books is that when the surface of the water is calm, there is no ripples, no waves, then that's a very tranquil state. And the thoughts and emotions and feelings, all of these things disturb the water of the mind, if you like. So that's the analogy. And so meditation is something that can still that water. The state of concentration would be the mind lake, so to speak, is very calm. There is no disturbance of any kind. Now, those of us who go to a river or oftentimes an ocean, we know that on the surface there are lots of waves and there's a lot of disturbance. But those who have done diving, especially deep sea diving, we know that as we dive and go deeper and deeper under the surface of water, the disturbance that we find on the upper layers become less and less and less. And if you can go really deep, if someone can go, those who go in a submarine and say even go to the bottom of the Atlantic or the Pacific, will find that the water is completely still, like a glass, piece of glass. So the mind is a little bit like that. Our mind is a little bit like that. Even when we feel that the mind is disturbed, it's only the upper layers of the mind that are disturbed. If we can dive deep inside our own mind, we will be able to reach the depths in our mind where there is complete stillness, there's complete calmness. So meditation is something that can help us probe the depths of our own mind. In fact, there are many songs. There was one song that Ramakrishna was very fond of. You might have read about it in his Gospel of, which says, dive deep, oh my mind. It's a beautiful song. The original is in Bengali. It's a beautiful song. So that is what meditation can help us do. As for the distinction between something that happens and something that we can do, our experience about sleep can help us recognize that. Now, sleeping is something that is something that we cannot do consciously. Although we say, oh, now I'm going to sleep, what I'm really doing is, at the most, going and lying down in my bed. Maybe if there is too much light, I can try to make the room dark. I try to see if there is no lot of sound is removed, light is removed, and I can find myself in a comfortable posture in a bed. That's what I'm doing. I'm not really sleeping. All that I'm doing really is creating a helpful environment for sleep to happen. None of us, so far as I know, are able to will ourselves into sleep. In fact, none of us knows the exact moment when we enter into sleep. So we just lie down in bed, do whatever is necessary for sleep to happen, and then just wait. If you are lucky, if you have good karma, you will sleep very quickly. Otherwise, it can take time. But sleep is something that none of us knows when it will happen, how it happens. In the same way, if we can close our eyes while meditating and just see the divine in our heart, see God in our heart, then there's nothing needs to be done, because then that's the state of consciousness we want to reach. But if we close our eyes and we just see darkness, then we need to do something about it. Now that doing something is then thinking. And that thought, the idea is that if I can think, as Patanjali says, in a one-pointed way, eliminating all other thoughts, all other ideas, then at some point that thinking will stop and seeing will begin. So at some point, we will never know that, just as we will never know at which moment we enter into sleep, we will never really know when thinking will stop and seeing will begin. But until that happens, we need to know, we need to keep on thinking. Now, of course, thus any kind of random thinking will not take us there. So we need a systematic way of thinking, a disciplined way of thinking. And that right way of thinking is what we learn from a teacher. So that is why guidance in meditation is necessary, because all of us think. Sometimes we might refer to some people as thinkers, as if to say other people don't think, which is not true. Every one of us thinks. But only those people who are able to think in a systematic way, they're able to arrange and rearrange all the thoughts in their minds in a proper way, we call them thinkers. And for the other people, we also think, but all the thoughts are all scattered, helter-skelter, and then we ourselves don't know where our thoughts are. It's a little bit the difference between all of us have things in our room. Some people are able to organize them well and systematically, and some people, things would be just lying all over. That's the only difference. But thinking, everyone does. So thinking in a systematic way, disciplined way, is what leads to a successful practice of meditation. Now, the thinking there are at least two ways of thinking. One way of thinking is sometimes called that which is nature-oriented. By nature, I'm using the word, translating the Sanskrit word prakriti. That is everything other than the spiritual reality. Everything that is material there is a Sanskrit word called prakriti, often translated as nature. So one kind of meditation, one kind of thinking is nature-oriented. It's called prakriti ashraya. And the other kind of thinking is Brahman-oriented. That's called brahmashraya. Now, the strictly yogic form of meditation, emphasized in Patanjali's system, is nature-oriented. And there, the goal is the realization of the self as separate from nature. So the yogic metaphysic is that Purusha is the principle of consciousness, and nature is a material force. And as the yoga metaphysic sees it, this consciousness is trapped by Prakriti, trapped by nature. And so the yogic meditation is really a meditation on thinking on nature, understanding the different levels, the different stages of nature, and then recognizing that this self, so you are directly thinking about nature and indirectly acquiring the knowledge of the self as separate from nature. It's paradoxical. We call it the yogic tradition, and yoga means, one of the meaning of yoga is joining, but really the way it is conceptually seen in the yogic tradition, the practice really leads to separation of this Purusha from Prakriti. So really, and there is a Sanskrit verse that says that the practice of yoga really leads to viyoga, so that is separation. So that's how it is seen in the yogic tradition. Now, in the Vedantic tradition, which is Brahman-oriented practice, the ultimate goal is knowledge of the self as Brahman, as the infinite being. And this is attained directly through either a subjective meditation or indirectly through objective meditation. So there are two divisions within the Vedantic way of doing it. Now, in meditation in Vedanta, the objective approach is sometimes called upasana, and the subjective approach is called atma vichara, deep inquiry into the nature of the self. And that is what then has a special name called nididhyasana in Vedantic practice. Now, the object of meditation in upasana can be either personal or impersonal. Now, personal means think about it this way. The divine can be conceived of as either with some form and with qualities. That's called, with form is called sakara, akara is form. So sakara means with form, and saguna, with qualities. That's one way of thinking about God. Another way of thinking about God is nirguna, formless, but with qualities. And a third way of thinking about God is nirguna and nirakara, formless and without qualities. Now, all of these three, there is no higher or lower here. All these three are equally effective ways of thinking of God. So many of the deities in Vedantic tradition, so you find whether it's Vishnu, Shiva, Rama, Krishna, they have a form, there's a big mythology around them, and they have qualities. God, as God is conceived primarily in the Abrahamic traditions, has qualities. We speak of God as loving, kind, just, but there is no one specific form. So it's a formless, but with qualities. And then there is this third, which is formless and without qualities. That is where this subjective meditation comes in, where atma vichara. No matter whether our object of our thinking is personal or impersonal, one thing is common to all Vedantic tradition, and that is the recognition that Brahman itself transcends both the personal and impersonal binary. So to see Brahman as personal is as much a limitation as to see Brahman as impersonal. And therefore, the misconception that somehow formless is higher than with form, that's really a misguided way of thinking. Once someone asked Sri Ramakrishna, does God have form or is God formless? And then Sri Ramakrishna says, God can have form, God can be formless, and so much more besides. In other words, the reality is beyond not only the notion of form, but also the notion of formlessness. So, whichever way we think of God, all of these ways are effective, provided we remember that the ultimate reality is beyond description. All descriptions are a way to make that higher reality somehow tangible. In our present state of evolution, for us to worship spirit as spirit may not be possible now. And therefore, we can take the help of a form or a quality or an attribute. Any of these helps are fine, provided we remember that the reality transcends all of these. The meditation that is done in Vedanta societies, in the Ramakrishna tradition, is not limited to any. We don't cage ourselves in simply yogic meditation or this meditation. The way Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swamiji taught these techniques, it's a very holistic, comprehensive, harmonious approach. So the elements from all these different traditions are woven in a very harmonious way, in the way Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda taught the meditation, and as it has been passed on from one generation to the next in the Vedanta societies. Sometimes it is also helpful to think of meditation as a practice that goes alongside prayer and worship. Prayer and worship are not as popular today as meditation. Everyone wants to do meditation. But it's not often recognized that for a meditation practice to be effective, it's not just about just sitting for a few minutes with closed eyes and doing something. That doesn't automatically become meditation. There has to be an adequate preparation in order for meditation to be a successful activity. And many have found that prayer provides a very strong foundation, a very strong, helpful aid in order for us to become fit for meditation. Worship also. In fact, the three can be seen as connected practices. Prayer in some ways is the simplest of all practices. Yes, simplest, but there are certain requirements even for prayer. Sometimes they speak about the prayer of an atheist, saying, "Oh Lord, if there is a Lord, save my soul, if there is a soul." This is not very helpful. So if prayer has to work, it needs some faith. At least enough faith to know that when I pray, there is someone listening. As I've said on earlier occasions, on several occasions, that sometimes because the word faith gets used in religious contexts, and in fact, religions themselves are often called faiths. People make the mistake of thinking that faith is something necessary only in religious or spiritual domains. And if I'm rational, if I'm logical, then I don't need any faith, which is not true. Life would be impossible without faith. And for instance, as I say sometimes, when we fly, we have no idea who the pilot is. We have no idea whether just like when you check in your bag, you have no idea yet you will find your bags when you land at the destination. But it's faith that, well, among all these thousands of bags that are going, ultimately my bag will be loaded onto my flight and I will find it when I reach the destination. So there is faith there. Otherwise, we wouldn't just give away our luggage every time we fly like that. When we speak over the phone, we have faith that the person we have called is holding the phone. Sometimes if you get a phone from someone who just calls very often and has nothing very important to say, people just kind of switch it on and keep it and then get busy doing something else. And that person then, if he doesn't hear any response from you, say, hello, are you there? Are you there? They'll say. So we need some kind of a response, or at least the faith that there is someone listening to what I'm saying. Now, we need faith in prayer because it's a kind of a conversation we are having with God. And we don't always listen, hear a response. So then that's where we need faith, that when I pray, God is listening. We need also faith that every prayer is answered. Again, something that we have spoken of before is we often feel that a prayer is answered, always meaning is answered with a yes. But no is an answer. So when we pray for something and don't get it, prayer has been heard and God has said no. But that is not the kind of answer we want. So faith really means God listens to what I am saying, and God will do for me what is good for me. So when God says no, that is an act of love. And as parents, many of you know this. When your children, especially when the children are small and they are dependent on you, you don't give them everything they ask for. There are often times you have to say no. You don't say no because you don't like your children. You say no out of love. You know that this is not good for them, or this may not be helpful to them at that stage. So saying no can be an act of profound love. So when we pray for something and don't get it, that's not because God is angry with us. It's because God loves us. God knows that that may not be the right thing for me. In fact, we are so fortunate that all of our prayers are not answered. We would be in deep, deep trouble if every prayer was answered. And so it's really, if anybody doubts in the existence of God, the fact that many of our prayers are not answered shows that God exists and God loves us. So prayer really creates the right inner environment in order for us to be ready for the practice of meditation. What prayer does, especially sometimes we may not be able to recognize God's love with a no answer to our prayer. But when we get a yes answer to the prayer, when we want something and we get it, then our faith gets strengthened a bit more. When you say, oh, I prayed for God and God answered. So a yes answer oftentimes helps to strengthen and deepen our faith. When we get something that we want, the heart is filled with gratitude. And one of the ways gratitude gets expressed is in the act of giving. So worship can be seen as an activity that is done with a heart that is filled with gratitude. So worshipful attitude comes naturally when we feel satisfaction, contentment, fulfillment through the act of praying. So when I pray for something, my heart is filled, and out of gratitude then, I feel like giving something to God. Now, what can I give to God which God doesn't have? Sometimes when people have to give birthday presents, they are like, sometimes we know it's so difficult, not always easy to know what to give. And it becomes even, because sometimes people say, is there something you need so I can give it to you as a gift? But God doesn't need anything. We can give to God what is already God's, because everything, including ourselves, we belong to God. There is a proverb in Bengali, which says there is one kind of puja that's done in India because the river Ganges itself is seen as a sacred river. Ganges is seen as one of the deities also. So once in a year, there's a day of Ganga Puja. So the river Ganges is worshipped. Now, the Ganges water, because it is considered as sacred, that Ganges water is used while doing other forms of worship. Oh, we for our puja here, we have a little bit of Ganges water. Some of you might have seen I put a few drops of it while doing puja to sanctify the water that we used. Now, when you are worshipping Ganges herself, so the puja is done on the bank of the river. Now, what water are you going to bring to worship Ganges? Because the Ganges water is the water that we use to worship other deities. And so, essentially, it looks a bit odd. You're taking water from the Ganges, and then you're offering it back to Ganges. So that's essentially what all worship is. But there is a joy in giving. So all the fruits and sweets and flowers and incense, everything that we offer to God already belongs to God. But there is a joy in that act of giving. So if prayer is a movement from God towards the devotee, then worship is a movement from the devotee towards God. Now, when these two things, prayer and worship, bring both God and the devotee closer and closer to one another, that is the time when meditation can be the right time, the right preparation for meditation is done. And therefore, it's helpful. Now, one doesn't have to do very elaborate forms of prayer or elaborate forms of worship, but somehow, if in some way, in however brief a form, prayer and worship can be incorporated in our spiritual practice, then meditation becomes easier, a little bit more joyful. Now, the second question is, well, how do we go about it, the meditation? We have seen what meditation is. One way, of course, is books. There are many books on meditation. If you now go to Amazon or go to Barnes & Noble, and there's a big section. It's a very topic in which people are interested, and many have written books on meditation. And it's difficult to know which book shall I follow. So books can be helpful, but in order for us to, if we want to take up meditation as a serious practice, then we need a teacher. The book itself may not be enough. Swami Vivekananda said this, so let me read his words to you. The quickening impulse cannot be derived from books. The soul can only receive impulses from another soul and from nothing else. We may study books all our lives. We may become very intellectual, but in the end, we find that we have not developed at all spiritually. In studying books, we are sometimes deluded into thinking that thereby we are being spiritually helped. But if we analyze the effect of the study of books on ourselves, we shall find that at the utmost, it is only our intellect that derives profit from such studies and not our inner spirit. The inadequacy of books to quicken spiritual growth is the reason why, although almost every one of us can speak most wonderfully on spiritual matters, when it comes to action and the living of truly spiritual life, we find ourselves so awfully deficient. To quicken the spirit, the impulse must come from another soul. The person from whose soul such impulse comes is called the Guru, the teacher, and the person to whose soul the impulse is conveyed is called the Shishya or the student. So very clearly, Swamiji points out that books can be helpful, but in order for us to truly benefit from the practice, we need to get the training, the instruction from a teacher. Now, what a teacher is not just a person. A teacher is a representative of a living spiritual tradition. Just as we have a biological lineage, our parents and our grandparents and the great-grandparents. Just as we can trace our family tree, we can also trace our spiritual lineage. And the beauty is, in the Upanishads, in some of the places, we find this lineage mentioned. In Sanskrit, sometimes they call it the Vamsha Parampara. And you will find there'll be a few names of many of the Vedic rishis in that lineage. Most of the time, beyond the names, we really don't know anything about these people. But the beauty is, after some time, after a few names are mentioned, it all ultimately ends up either in Shiva or Vishnu. Meaning that ultimately, God alone is the teacher of all of us. And that is what Sri Ramakrishna taught. You read in his conversations, again and again you find him saying, Satchidananda alone is the Guru. God alone is the teacher. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the definition of Ishvara, he says, Sapurvesham api Guruhu. He is the teacher of all teachers. So, in a real sense, God alone is the teacher. Now, it's that power that is transmitted from one generation to the next. And so, getting a teacher, therefore, is not simply, a teacher is not imparting something just from one's own intellectual studies. The teacher, what the teacher imparts is what he or she has received from his or her own teacher. So that's what Swamiji means here by saying the quickening impulse. It's a little bit like if a new home is constructed and you have all the fixtures ready, the bulb, the fans, everything is ready. But none of these will work unless and until it is connected to the mains and the power supply begins. In exactly the same way, we may read all the books, we may do all the things, but that power, that quickening impulse can come only when we are connected to a living spiritual tradition. And that's the reason why the Vedas say, Acharyati prapya vidya sadhishta prapishtha bhavati. And that is only the knowledge, the training, the instruction that is received from a teacher, only that knowledge becomes fructified. It is only that knowledge that reaches its fulfillment, showing the inevitability of receiving that guidance from a living teacher. Because the meditation practice is very varied with many different traditions, the details can be very, very different. And that's why the meditation, the brief meditation that we do before every satsang and before every class, you can see it's just a very bare minimal, because the details can vary from one tradition to another, from one teacher to another. And that is why you will see that I'm not a big fan of these elaborate guided meditations, partly because it sometimes leads to the misguided notion that one way fits everybody. It never does. We are different. Yes, there are a lot of things we share in common. Right now, we are all human beings. That's something we share. But on the other hand, our way of understanding, our way of looking, our way of relating is very, very different. And therefore, one method fits all doesn't really work. Having said that, what I will briefly mention now are some of the elements that may be common to most meditation practices. Again, this is not a very rigid template, but these are some of the elements you will find in irrespective of the specific technique one may be following. One of the first things that gets discussed in meditation is the posture, asana. How should we sit or stand or sleep? Oftentimes, generally, in Vedantic meditation certainly, they say that the ideal posture is that the back should be straight. Swami Vivekananda in his Raja Yoga mentions that the head, shoulder and hips must be in a straight line. All of our thinking occurs along the spinal column. So straight but not rigid. That's not like some military kind of straight. But a straight, for any activity requiring concentration, a straight back is very helpful. And so first, generally, there is a talk about posture, what kind of posture we must have. Then many of the meditation practices will require certain preliminaries. That preliminaries often involve prayer. They include some special kinds of breathing in order to calm down the mind and get ready for meditation. And then the next stage is, of course, where to meditate. And then there are different, again, there is no one rigid rule for this. But Sri Ramakrishna often said that the heart is the best place to meditate. Well, God is everywhere. As Sri Ramakrishna put it in his own very inimitable way, was that just as at home, we could be in any place in the home, any room of the home. But generally, they might find us in one particular room more often than in every nook and corner of the home. In the same way, God can be all over. Who can stop God from being anywhere? But generally, the living room of God will be the heart. And therefore, it is easier to locate God there. The heart, again, very briefly, it's not obviously the anatomical heart. The physiological heart, we know there isn't much place for anybody to sit there. So that's clearly not the heart that is referred to. But the heart is also a seat of emotions. We know that when we are overwhelmed with any emotion, we feel a kind of a feeling sensation here. Sometimes people touch their heart and say, I'm saying this from my heart, or the fullness of my heart. We know that even language has developed that way. So there is this emotional heart. And just as there is a physiological heart, there is the emotional heart, and there is a spiritual heart. So we really have three hearts. Don't go on telling this to all your friends without giving them the context, that they'll think there's something wrong with you. But essentially, all of these three hearts are in the same area. Now, the physiological heart, we know where it is. None of us has seen our own heart, but our surgeon might see it. Hopefully, there'll never need to be a time for the surgeon to see it, but at least there is a way of locating the physiological heart. The emotional heart, sometimes when we are filled with emotions, we can kind of feel something here in this area. So similarly, the spiritual heart is also in this area. So sometimes when we are asked to meditate in the heart, even before we find God there, we must first find the heart. So that's the first challenge. So oftentimes, one of the first experiences that can come to a meditator is discovery of that heart. Because how big, this doesn't seem to be like a big area. And so our notion of space will have to be modified. Yes, from our present way, this is a very small area. But once we discover the spiritual heart, it will no longer look like such a small area. It's a whole different dimension altogether. Just like time. We might sleep, say, even the dream that we have at night. We have slept for only, say, 7 or 8 hours, and we see a few dreams. But even one dream, the dream time could be like you might see in the dream time, say, 10 years of your life. And it won't seem like it's going in a fast-forward mode. The dream time will go at the same speed with which this time goes. But the waking time and the dream time are completely different dimensions. In the same way, this space and the spiritual space are of totally different dimensions. So once we discover the heart, we can see that not only the form of our Ishta, the entire universe can be filled there. It's that huge. So first is discovering that heart and then meditating on the divine. And in the beginning, we might have to use a creative imagination. we reflected on this a few weeks ago. There are two kinds of imagination: imagining the imaginary and imagining the real. Now, imagining the imaginary, you can imagine the imaginary for millions of years and nothing will happen. But imagining the real, that there is something you know it's there, or you have faith is there, but you haven't seen it. Then you try to imagine it's there, and that imagination then becomes transformed into experience, provided you are imagining the real. If you are imagining the imaginary, it will never become a part of one's direct experience. So then, usually, the chosen ideal that we have in our meditation, often chosen by the teacher, that's called Ishta Devata. And if it's a personal form of God, then the meditation practice might include a form of mental worship, a small worship done mentally. And then the next part oftentimes is a prayer, a mantra that we receive. A mantra is actually a short prayer. So a repetition of the mantra, it's called the practice of japa. Holy Mother used to say, japat siddhihi, the japa alone can give me the highest that I am seeking. So there is the mental worship, there is the japa, and then after that there is the meditation. One can stop counting the repetition numbers after some time, and finally the most meditation practice would end with some kind of a conclusion, upasamhara, oftentimes with the form of surrender. Again, this is a very general template. And as I said, the details might vary from one tradition to another, from one teacher to another. So to conclude very briefly, no matter which specific practice we have, ultimately what that practice will do is the highest benefit from meditation is that we realize God, or we have self-knowledge. So whichever way we conceive of the spiritual ideal, we will attain to that state through this practice. Now that's the primary purpose and the primary goal and the primary benefit of the practice. Now in addition to that, there are some additional benefits. It definitely provides a clarity of mind. It makes the mind calm. It increases our inner strength. And it definitely promotes both physical and mental health. So these are all benefits. Now, not everyone who takes up meditation does it with the idea of, I want to realize God. People might say it, but they don't always mean it. A lot of times people turn to meditation because of the other benefits that, it reduces my stress, or I can sleep well, or it gives some health benefits. That's fine. It's fine to do meditation for that purpose. What's not fine is to then think that I'm doing something very spiritual. So if my primary purpose of meditation is to eliminate stress or to experience some kind of peace of mind, then that's a secular practice. So that's a secular meditation. But if meditation is a spiritual discipline, then the primary purpose of meditation is to realize God. And the other benefits will come, but that's not the primary thing one is looking for. And finally, just a few helpful tips for whatever meditation practice that we may be doing. One thing is, if we can consciously try to eliminate from our lives everything that makes us forget the spiritual ideal, it can then strengthen our meditation practice. One other helpful thing is to not observe the mind while meditating. We can do all analysis of how the meditation was, whether it's good or bad or whatever, after the practice is over, not while doing the practice. Because while I'm practicing, the only thing in my mind should be my Ishta, my chosen ideal, or God. At that time, if I start looking, how is my mind doing today, then the meditation has really ended. Then I'm really meditating on my mind rather than meditating on God. And so therefore it's not very helpful to observe one's own mind. It's also not very helpful to enjoy, because sometimes when you have really having a good meditation, it brings a kind of a joy inside. That joy is an obstacle, believe it or not. In the sense that you can kind of feel that joy, but if you pause to observe that joy, then your meditation has ended. If the moment you say, today I'm having such great meditation, then it's finished. Your meditation has already come to an end. And so the test is, no matter how wonderful you are feeling, resist the temptation to taste that joy. Keep your mind on God. After the meditation is over, then you can be very happy about it. But during meditation, no. That obstacle is sometimes called rasa aswadana. Rasa is the taste. Aswadana means taste. Rasa is the joy, and aswadana is tasting. So not to pay attention to the mind about how it is doing while meditating. One other thing helpful is a kind of a self-discipline. As far as possible, if we can try to do our spiritual practice at the same time every day, in a same place, if we can keep aside a certain robe or a meditation dress for meditation. All these are small things, but they do help in making the practice easier. And finally, of course, there is a lot of patience, lot of perseverance, and of course, sincerity of mind is very important. There are people in this world we can fool if we are smart enough, but there is nobody smart enough to fool God. So don't even try. So it's well, really we don't have any choice. So the best way to deal with God is to just be open and frank, because God knows us better than we know ourselves. So these are then the three primary questions that we took very brief look today. What is meditation? How to meditate? And what are the benefits of meditation? So this was just a very preliminary introductory look at a practice which all of us are doing in one form or other. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. This Wednesday, instead of the Kaivalya Upanishad class as we would have had, we will have a special lecture by visiting Swami. So we have a guest speaker, Swami Nirmalatmananda, who is the head of our center in Brazil. He is visiting, and I requested him to share his thoughts. And so he will be speaking on Vedanta in South America. So if you have been to South America or would like to go there at some point or visit Brazil, please do come on Wednesday. And also, this Swamiji is a great fan of football, soccer. And Brazil hasn't really reached the final as they hoped they would. And so he is a little bit grieving. So please come and support him and encourage him to speak about Vedanta in South America. And next Sunday, our subject will be synthesis of yoga, another an important subject to reflect on. And on Tuesday and Saturday, our Arati and meditation will continue as usual. Let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus. Lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.